discretion is advised.
Hi, welcome to the Liam Scheff Show on Frequency Radio, UCY TV, and now on TalkNetwork.com. It is Sunday or Wednesday or possibly Thursday, depending on where you are and what you're wearing. It's sometime in February or March, or if this show's a rerun, at some other point. Which is to say, thanks for being on the show and thanks for listening. Let's go through a quick rundown of news. I'm going to talk about the Porter Ranch gas leak. Let's see, what else do I have on my news pulled up? I've got interesting articles about relationships. I've often talked about relationships. I've got a great article by Geoffrey Sinclair on Fukushima. Yes, we're going to do a Fukushima, Porter Ranch, and threesome update. Fukushima, Porter Ranches, and threesomes. Today on the Liam Scheff Show. I want to thank the handful of listeners who have very, 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 very kindly done what I asked. I can't really believe it, but they actually did something I asked them to. If you're a fan of the show, if you enjoy my book, Official Stories, if you'd like to keep my research going as I write Official Stories 2, and my book on understanding religion, which will be part of Official Stories 2, but may be published as a separate supplement first, to enthrall and enthuse all of you, or some of you, or many of you, or many of some of many. What I'm trying to say is thank you. You went to my webpage, you went to YouTube, and you went to the PayPal link. You actually went to the PayPal link, and you put in $5 or $10 or $20 or dollars, and you sent it to me. $7. That was nice. Genuinely. No, I really appreciate it. It was very touching. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect anything, but a few people have decided that it's worth it to keep me on the air and doing the research and talking about the things that I talk about in my voice, which I think is probably inimitable, or maybe you can imitate it if you try really hard. But anyway, a genuine thank you. Thank you very much for thinking of me and trying to keep me in Trader Joe's cashews, my primary food source. Thank you very much. No, genuinely from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And you can go to liamscheff.com or Facebook or my YouTube channel, and there's a PayPal link. It's all over Facebook. It's on my radio broadcasts on UCY TV. It says it's a PayPal link, and if you can put in $5, $10, or $15, or $20, or whatever you're made of, to keep it going, if you enjoy the programming. Huge scandal, Political Insider. This is fairly red journalism. Also might be true. Might be true. Chelsea isn't Bill Clinton's daughter. Might be true. Might be true. Might be true. It's an allegation. It's not even an accusation. It's an allegation. I don't care about the Clintons. Hillary Clinton seems to be insane. Bill Clinton seems to be the prince of Machiavelli. They had a daughter who I never really thought much about. It wasn't my business to think about her. She was a child, and then she was a teenager, and then she was a college student, and then she was an adult. But she wasn't running for anything. And now, like Ivanka, the little trumpet, is standing outside of Bernhard Sanders' tent and waving her little flag, which doesn't bother me because it's all a show and I don't care. I don't care about politics. It's all Roman emperors pretending to run for office. It's totally irrelevant. But it's interesting because Chelsea Clinton looks like her mother. Hey, okay, all right. She looks like her mother. Side by side, does she look like her dad? Side by side, she looks a little bit like this other guy. And that's not definitive. It's not definitive, but there is this other guy. It's a rough one. This is tough. It's hard to. There's this other guy, right? His name is Larry. No, it's not Larry Nichols. It's Chelsea Clinton's real father is Webster Hubble. Webster Hubble, former mayor of Little Rock, Arkansas. Town that built the Clintons. Hubble was a law partner at Rose Law Firm with Hillary and became one of the most important Clinton insiders. It's interesting. Now, why would they be trying to smear Hillary? Because they don't want her to be president, and she made a deal with Bill Clinton that if he became president, she took enough public fake shaming for the scandal that she didn't care about. Oh, Jesus, Bill, do I really have to go out there and pretend to care about you screwing Monica Lewinsky's space? Who cares? Who cares? We just want power. All we want is power. Who cares whose space you screw? Jesus, God. On the dress, Bill, on the dress. I have to go and talk to that whore Diane Sawyer, that Nixon speechwriting whore. Damn the pretty ones, damn the pretty ones. Anyway, like she cared. Okay. Anyway, she didn't care. She didn't care at all. Nobody cared. But maybe one night at the Rose Law Firm, it's possible. It's possible. It's possible. It's not definitive. It's possible. Anyway, it's interesting. Why? Because they're trying to destroy her, Hillary. It's irrelevant, as soon as Hillary admits or doesn't admit, or it becomes the scandal du jour, and she goes away, nobody will care about who poor little Chelsea Clinton's dad is, and they'll wish her good luck. The same way we don't remember Nicole Richie, or we barely remember Paris Hilton anymore, although she's made quite a couple of really good movies. If you've ever gone online and looked for them, Paris Hilton video. There you go. News item number 1. News item number 2, Bill Cosby headed to trial. He said, she said, 12 years after the fact. He's a very messy guy. I don't think he'll be selling any Jell-O pudding pops anytime soon. Now people are saying, he was a bastard to some guy who got, some NFL guy who got or was it a basketball guy, who got a bad GPA, 2-point-something GPA, and Bill Cosby was really mean to him and told him it was a disgrace. And so people have their Bill Cosby stories, but we talked about Bill Cosby before, and the big joke about Bill Cosby isn't on whatever he did or didn't. It's on us. It's on us, because we watch TV and we think it's real. We actually think that the make-believe, what do you want to call it, the make-believe morality of television has anything to do with real life. Of course it doesn't. Of course it has nothing to do with real life. Speaking of real life, when you're done obsessing over whether Hillary, Bill, Jeb, and the rest of the Bushes live on a flat Earth or a spheroid, by the way, how do you know the Earth is round? Because if you go to a very tall building, very, very, very tall, you can almost see the curvature of the Earth. And if you watch a ship sailing over the sea, it will appear to descend under the horizon line because of the curvature of the Earth if the day is long and clear enough. And if you put a rocket, like even a kid's rocket from a toy store or hobby store, into the lower atmosphere and you put a camera on it, you can see the curvature of the Earth. Speaking of fake news, I want to talk about something that I'm going to call the Judy Wood syndrome. And this is something that happens to the conspiracy community. The conspiracy community is formed of, 10 to 20% hard-bitten researchers. Maybe fewer, maybe 10, maybe 15, I don't know. But hard-bitten researchers, very, very hard at it. I have been one of those researchers who spent my time delving into the academic prose and shop talk to unearth reality for you. I don't care to do it anymore. I'm resign myself to being a philosopher of understanding the human species, and sometimes I'll still read an academic paper, but I guarantee once you've read 2,000 of them, you've read them all, and I've read 2,000 of them, thanks, or somewhere thereabouts, or more, or in part 5,000, or in part 10,000. It's just endless. It's endless. It's endless. The work you do when trying to understand some of the big issues. Once you understand a few of the big issues, you understand they all work the same way. The officials come out there, they trumpet some of their quack science. It's all quack science. We should be talking duck ponds, and I think we will in the next show, because that's something I'm going to be getting into. But the conspiracy community used to not be a community. It used to be a bunch of loners and insiders, best typified by the 1990s television program, The X-Files. No other version of The X-Files need apply, but the early 1990s version of The X-Files. And there was a trio of lunatics called the Lone Gunmen. They just spent their time researching, and they were skeptical to almost a fault, and wouldn't believe anything and constantly argued with each other. Well, that's pretty much right. That's hard-bitten researchers. And I've been one of those, hate to say it, didn't like it, but inside of the AIDS bubble, I was one of those guys. And to some degree, a little bit vaccines, mostly the AIDS bubble and the 9/11 thing. I looked pretty deeply, but AIDS and astronomy too, and Shakespeare a little bit. Anyway, I've dabbled. When people don't give you respect for a long time for probably being correct and probably being the brightest couple of people in the room, these conspiracy people begin to fray. They go a little mad. They develop bad habits. Twinkies, Ho-Hos, Oreos, standing by the refrigerator at midnight just pulling the peanut butter out of the peanut butter ice cream. Shouldn't do that. Don't do that. But that's what happens. Or harder things, alcohol, Comic-Cons. Terrible, terrible, terrible things to do to yourself if you're a nerdy, geeky, or dorky researcher, is to walk the route of the Comic-Con. Because at some point, you will begin to lose the thread of reality. Enter Judy Woods. The 9/11 thing is pretty easy to figure out. Two giant skyscrapers fall apart, explode outward and downward about 45 minutes apart from each other after being hit by airplanes about an hour and 10 minutes apart from each other, something like that. Longest possible time for a fall is about 13 seconds. 13 seconds. It's not a fall, it's an explosion. There's no weight on top. The thing keeps exploding on floors that shouldn't be affected by any downward and outward pressure, but oh my God, it was Osama bin Laden. Played by Alan Alda in the upcoming movie. He's actually looking more... All right, never mind. Where have you gone, Hawkeye? That's what I want to know. It's not hard to figure out that those buildings didn't fall down due to gravity. If you can want to watch something fall down due to gravity, go to the apartment, the second floor of your condo or the roof of your house or whatever, and, I don't know, take a cinder block and drop it. It'll fall, and it'll crack, and it will lay there cracked. It won't explode. Parts of it won't be found a football field away. It'll just crack. It'll crack the sidewalk. Don't throw it on your little brother. Don't do that. It's not nice. Don't do that. Don't do it. Don't. All right. You're on a ban. You're on a break. Can't do that anymore. So you know that there's something wrong. Now there were guys. I think there was a Stephen Jones. I'm sorry to forget his name. And he was a researcher at Brigham Young, Brigham Old University, and he said this looks a lot like nanothermite. And shit. And then they fired him, of course, because, you're not supposed to say that and be in a position of respectability. Other people said, yeah, it looks like nanothermite. And then people got fucky with it. People got really weird with it because, the answer was too clear. It was blown up. Building 7 comes down, straight down, like a controlled demolition. WTC 1 and 2 go out like an uncontrolled explosion or a mildly controlled explosion, from the top down, ka-kung, 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 ka-kung. That's what it looks like. That's what it sounded like. That's why there were multiple explosions heard from within the thing, as firefighters recorded in the New York Times diary of 9/11 reported many times. Oh, it was like what are those? What are the thingies called? When they blow up a building, a controlled. What is it called? Hey, Ralphie, what is it called? A controlled demolition? You mean? Yeah, that's what it was like. That was like the building came down, boom, 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 right around us, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. Right there in the New York Times. People like to forget that. I was introduced to it late. 2006-07. I had been aware of the idea in 2004 and 5 when I was writing for GNN, the Grousing Nerds Network, Guerrilla News Network, owned and operated by God only knows, because it was just a bastion of trolls and bastards. But anyway, I was familiar with the idea. It was hard to look at. It was hard to watch those videos the first time. I cried. No, I'm not kidding. I cried. I don't mean I bawled. I cried. I teared, and I became emotional, and I was very upset because I realized that the buildings were not collapsing. They were exploding. And that's when I got into that. Anyway, it's chapter 4 of my book, Official Stories, available on Amazon.com for a song. Much less than the competing conspiracy compilations, and much better. Thank you. Much more original than anything out there. It's Official Stories by Liam Scheff. Chapter 4, 9/11. So you can figure out that something is wrong. Well, the people doing the work got no respect. They got fired. There were a number of people in university positions who were fired. There were researchers like Richard Gage who tirelessly, or perhaps he got tired, went around the country. I saw one of his shows in Boston and presented his data calmly eruditely, with a willingness to accept questions and to contend with things that we'll, for the sake of argument, call facts, because at least they're reproducible, or they make sense to logics, physics, and history, unlike all religion and most science. And then people got fucky. And because nobody cared, and because the best evidence didn't make sense, the worst evidence started to come to the surface. And every idea came to bear. It came to be more acceptable to think almost anything than the most plausible explanation. There are many sayings about the most plausible explanation. The shortest distance between 2 points is straight line, or is it Foucault's pendulum or something like that? No, Foucault, Pascal's wager, Foucault's pendulum. Anyway, there's something called the something logical pendulum, and the idea is that shortest distance between 2 points is straight line. If you can cut cleanly and across and find your way through a problem, it's probably more accurate than to be incredibly circuitous, illogical, and to use the least reproducible, least in evidence material. Why don't you stick with what we can actually prove? And to those things that we cannot prove or hold in our hand, or at least demonstrate within a very, very good range of probability, meaning we can prove a lot of it or demonstrate a lot of it without invoking theoretical math, hypothetical math, black holes, wormholes, white holes, or any other kind of hole that you care to put into the spectrum. That kind of thing we might be able to gently call at least a theory, if not a fact. So the theory is that the WTC buildings were exploded, they exploded outward, they came down, they rained down upon Lower Manhattan. Enter Judy Woods. Judy Woods, I don't know her pedigree, she might have one. That's why I don't worry about pedigrees, because people with pedigrees and PhDs are as likely to be wrong as people without them. In fact, they're often more likely to be wrong because they had to suck academic cock for 4 to 8 years, probably 6, probably 8, to be able to regurgitate the bullshit that earned them their piled higher and deeper award. I'm not saying there are no bright people who get PhDs, I'm saying they're all brainwashed. All of them. Anybody who puts a PhD after their name, I have to wonder what's wrong with them. If they get the PhD because they wanted to do the studies, they probably just go by their first name. Because they don't care. They don't need to have their asses licked, which is fine if you're into that sort of thing. Please shower first. For the record, I believe Bill Cosby put PhD after his name for his honorary PhD for the Cosby Kids show. No, you can for the Fat Albert show. So you can see who puts a PhD after their name and who doesn't. Judy Woods proposed that the WTC buildings, far from being simply exploded, even though the buildings were evacuated for weeks before 9/11 during the summer, that people heard large machinery being pushed around the floors, which I detail in my book, Official Stories, which is our news information from the general press that you can still look up. Never mind that people were coming and going. Never mind that it was a Bush cousin, I think Marvin, who was contracted to do the mother frickin' work on the WTCs. Never mind all of that. Never mind. It was an energy beam directed from where? Secaucus? Somewhere, Trenton, Newark, somewhere in Jersey, there was an energy beam. You see, somewhere in Jersey there was an energy beam, right? And we aims it at the WTC buildings, World Trade Center, from right across the river, right? And we shoots it, and it goes away, right? Then at 5-something, we do the same thing to WTC-7, and it comes down to controlled demolitions, right? Wrong. Judy Woods managed to scramble the very scrambleable minds of the human species in the conspiracy realm by suggesting that what they saw wasn't good enough. No, there had to be an energy beam coming from Voltron planet, Autobot planet, whatever, Megatron. And what's their planet? I don't know. Anyway, the Autobot planet shot an energy beam from a satellite, and it was powered by what? Well, that we didn't have to know about that. I mean, what would it take? Did nobody see an energy beam? Was it, directed by overhead flying planes? What powered such an energy beam? Was the plane plugged into the entire U.S. energy grid? Was there a power outage in all boroughs of New York and all of the big surrounding cities of New York State and New Jersey? Where did the power come from? Didn't matter. It was an energy beam, and if you didn't believe it, you were a you were a shill. You were a COINTELPRO shill. If you didn't believe it, you were a double agent for the FBI, CIA, Illuminati matrix, and you were poo-pooing the great Judy Woods, who would come forward and explain what a genius she was for figuring out that an energy beam that nobody could see, nobody heard, could not have been powered by a celestial source. Maybe it was powered by the Nebularians. Maybe. Back to Earth. Was necessary, not only possible, but necessary to invoke for the idea that these buildings had to be destroyed so that the United States military presence could be made forever in the Middle East in the era of steep oil decline. You see, we invoked the energy beam. We made the lightsaber glow. There are no lightsabers, but there are swords. George Lucas said, what's better than a samurai sword? A samurai sword on fire. An electrical laser samurai sword. A laser sword. If you say laser sword, it sounds kind of gay. Not in the exciting way, but, in that sort of 7th grade way. Look, I have a laser sword. Oh, shut up. Shut the fuck up. It's plastic. Judy Woods invoked the laser sword. And now, and that has faded, by the way. Nobody really cares. You know that an idea is going to go to potty when the conspiracy fantasists, the conspiracy mythologists, begin to have at it. AIDS has long been the bailiwick of conspiracy mythologists. AIDS is pretty simple to figure out. The tests do not work. The drugs kill the people that take them. In the 70s, the gay population was isolated, ghettoized, totally separated from any kind of support structure. They lived in very, very bad, crowded conditions in a very few cities. As males driven by testosterone, they had a lot of sex. Having a lot of sex, they had a lot of STDs. Having a lot of STDs, they took a lot of antibiotics, black market antibiotics, most of the times that they were going to the baths. That rotted and destroyed their guts, punched holes in their guts, totally destroyed their liver, their mitochondria. They began to be very sick. They went into the hospitals. The doctors gave them super antibiotics like Bactrim. Then they gave them AZT. AZT destroyed their bone marrow. They died terrible deaths. The death rate went up staggeringly in the range of 4 to 5 times, 4 to 500%. Then they took AZT off the market after the AIDS quilt had been knitted, and the death rate went back down, and people thought that AIDS was over because of a drug revolution, but it was over because it had never really existed outside of people doing incredible toxicological damage to themselves, for the most part. There's a little more to the story in terms of expanding the definition to hemophiliacs and intravenous drug users, then expanding it to Africans who were very poor and had no clean drinking water, and the Bantustans, tin shack towns and townships of racist apartheid South African Idi Amin's Uganda. You can understand the story through biology, politics, history, even physics. You can understand how things on this planet work. That's why Noah's Ark isn't true. It defies biology, physics, what do you want to call it? The laws of thermodynamics. It totally destroys all of those things. Now, if you say that you need to believe it because it destroys all of those things, expecto patronum, they'll be making a new Harry Potter series soon. For the rest of us who want to be grown-ups, even if you're a spiritualist like me, you can understand that the universe is totally electrical, that it is a manifestation of an unknowable source. And when I say unknowable source, I don't mean that you call it Yahweh or Brahma or Allah. You call it unknowable source, knowing that you'll never understand the mystery. And that's going to have to be good enough. Now, the conspiracy mythologists come along and they say, well, because nobody believed us, we must not have mythologized it enough. So Judy Woods comes along and mythologizes the WTC. Right now, people are mythologizing planet Earth. Planet Earth, to the conspiracy mythologists, is now flat. Yes, the planet that you can fly around in an airplane, that you can sail around in a boat, that has been done hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times. The planet that looks different from every side that it's photographed on. The planet that you can see the curvature of if you put up a kid's toy rocket with a KB toy rocket with a little camera on it, timer camera. Yes, it's flat. No, they have proofs. The same way the Bible has proofs, the same way that the Transformers movie has books published about it. Just because it has books published about it doesn't make it true. Just because there are books and books of Star Wars, what do you call those, Star Wars vehicles with blueprints, doesn't mean you can build one that works. Unless you use an internal combustion engine and just drive it. But it ain't going to fly. Or at least it won't have a hyperdrive system. And it won't do the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs. This is the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV, Truth Frequency Radio, and now on Talk Network. You can support this show and all of my investigation and journalism by going to liamscheff.com or my Facebook page or my YouTube page, which I actually owe you guys a new video soon. Oh, thanks for doing construction outside. They want to help. They want to be heard. Raise your voices. Let's all be heard. Going to the PayPal link and putting in $5, $10, $20, whatever it is that you can afford. I don't have a monthly option. I haven't been that full of that kind of forethought yet. But when I begin to put out monthly material that I think is worth your $5 a month, I think I probably do, but I'll make a more concerted effort to do so. If you don't want to just throw a little money at me, then throw a little money at me and go to Amazon.com and buy official stories at a new low price of about $12. If you have Amazon Prime, you get the shipping for free, minus all the gasoline that you cost rushing something to your house. You can do the Kindle version for $4, something like that. 11 chapters, 10 topics. It will enlarge your thinking and hopefully remove any unwanted tattoos. Well, I can't promise that. We will be right back after this short musical interlude for Hour 1 Run-Out Groove. A few thoughts on what's coming up in... Half Hour 1 Run-Out Groove. A few thoughts on what's coming up in Half Hour 2. Stay tuned to the show. Hey, this is the Run Out Groove on UCY TV. Bottom of the hour, that's the half hour of the Liam Scheff Show. Truth Frequency Radio and Talk Network. I'm now on Talk Network with, so many people. All talking about important issues like, is that hair on Donald Trump's head? How did Ivanka and Chelsea become best buddies? And is Chelsea really Bill Clinton's daughter or Webster Hubbell's? If you look through the Hubble telescope, do you see Chelsea Clinton, I guess is the question. In the second half of the show, we're going to talk about Porter Ranch, the gas leak, the crumbling infrastructure in America. I'm going to read you an article by somebody else. I think it's a very good article. Very, very, very good article about Fukushima. It uses a title that I've used over and over again, so I suppose the writer and I have some similar educational references and self-educational references, and we'll get to that in a minute. Please support this independent journalist, that's me, yours truly, as I struggle to take apart myth from something we can sort of generally call fact, even though fact itself is a troubling word, and by fact I just mean things that are demonstrable, not in terms of argument, but in terms of the kinds of stones you can hold in your hand. You know, if I say that Adam was laying down on the ground, a rib taken out and made into a woman, there's nothing there that you can hold on to. It's a story, pure story. If I say that a man rose from the dead and he'll come back in a number of years and come back with swords in his eyes to kill all the non-believers, it's pure story. None of it's fact, it's not true, it's not in evidence, it's a story. If I say that, Tony Stark had heart surgery somewhere in a cave in Afghanistan and came back as a guy with an atomic heart or whatever it is, and a plasma heart, and can fly in the air in a little tin can, that's pure story. And you have to, it's important to be able to tell the difference between myth and something that you could generally take as a fact. Fact's a troubling word, and we'll get to that. Now in the second half of the show, Porter Ranch, Fukushima, and more on conspiracy mythology, which is, I think, where a lot of conspiracy theorists have gone. Talk a little more about that. Please support my work by buying official stories on Amazon.com, now on Kindle for the low price of about $4, on paperback for somewhere under $12. You cannot beat that deal. It's good for friends, family, homeschools, universities, anybody who needs to have a corrective lens put on their education. See you in a minute. Welcome back to the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV, Truth Frequency Radio, and Talk Network, talknetwork.com, ucy.tv. Is that right? ucy.tv, or is it ucytv.com? Hold on. It's worth knowing. ucy.tv, of course, truthfrequencyradio.com. You can support the Liam Scheff Show by buying my book, Official Stories. You can go to Amazon.com, find the Kindle, the paperback. You can read the first chapter and a half online for free. You can find excerpts at liamscheff.com under Official Stories. All sorts of excerpts that have been published, reviews, many good reviews, a few very, very, very angry, trollish reviews by people who didn't want to question the official stories, like vaccination. They were okay with JFK, but not with 9/11. They were okay with questioning the government, but not the government medical complex. They were okay with questioning CIA science, but not Darwinian so-called science. We've covered all these issues on the show. I think if this show had a theme, it was that of dispelling myth. And I don't mean dispelling myth in favor of science or pure science. I mean dispelling myth in favor of understanding that some things are indeed mythic, not historical, mythic, not biological, mythic, not grounded in any sense of physics or physical science. And by science, I mean what's observable, what you can reproduce, what's not really hard to prove or demonstrate, what doesn't take a great mental leap into abstraction to do. And in that vein of thinking, in that route of thinking, we've covered Big Bang, which isn't a theory. We've covered HIV, which really isn't a theory. We've covered vaccines, which isn't a theory. These are all myths. They're myths the same way. And I cover this in detail in my book, Official Stories, and I'll cover it again in Official Stories 2. But I want us to try to understand what the difference between a myth and something that we could call something that related to reality are, or that is, what the difference is. So what is a myth? It's the girl who brings you your drinks, or it's a story that is, I know, grown on your own time. It's a story that's so emotionally compelling that you don't need to really worry about the facts or the proof or the evidence, because you're already hooked. Like, hey, there's a guy who gets into an iron suit and flies in the air with missiles flying. Oh, tell me more. He has an iron suit and he flies at Mach 8. And he has missiles, and he can stop on a dime. God, that's cool. Can I have a suit like that? I wish I could have a suit like that. Oh, there's a guy who jumps around the city, and he has a military-industrial hardware suit, and he has a belt with all kinds of stuff on it, and then he has ships. Oh my God, he's dressed sort of like a bat, but not like a bat, but like sort of a god, kind of like Mars, god of war, who was a bat. You know, some dark war god like a Yahweh, an Indra, Moloch, something like that. Oh wow, man, but he's called Batman. Whoa, that sounds awesome. Does he have a car? Does he have a car? He has a car that can shoot like it has a motorcycle that comes out of part of it. If the car gets broken, and the motorcycle can spin because its wheels can like spin upside down, and then it can drive up walls and just like turn around immediately, and it has a grappling hook so the car can jump. Oh my God, that sounds so cool. Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Now, I don't mean can you build a prop of a car. You can build a prop of a car. You might be able to build a version of this working motorcycle. You're going to have to do a lot of jump cuts to make it all work on camera. But, you know, you can build a motorcycle that looks like something you're going to put in the movie and is something you're going to put in the movie. But is it really a Batman in a military, or does it just sort of look like one, and are you doing a lot of cuts and stunts and special effects to make it all work? What's the difference between a myth and reality? Is a movie reality? No, but it's supposed to look real. That's why we go to them. They convince us. Emotionally, we want verisimilitude. We want things to look real. We want an election to look real. We want there to be drama. We want to know that maybe somebody isn't somebody's daughter, and maybe somebody put something on a dress, and maybe somebody's secretly a socialist and is going to destroy the country by selling it to the Reds. Bernie Sanders is a socialist, and he's going to sell it to the Reds, see? We want to know. We want to know all this important stuff because we love being distracted. And now we want to know that the Earth is not really round but flat. Yes, the flat earthers are here. It's flat Earth too. It's not enough to see the curvature of the Earth from high places. It's not enough to be able to pilot a ship around the circumference of the world. It's not enough to be able to cross the poles and end up in another country. None of this is enough. None of it is enough because now there are people making very reasonable arguments. Very reasonable arguments. Are they? That the Earth is flat. This is not conspiracy theory. This isn't conspiracy realism. This is something else. This is what Judy Woods got into. As soon as your conspiracy theory, or your conspiracy realism, becomes ignored for long enough, people get tired. Here's how it works. Here's exactly how it works. The first group of people come out and say there's something fishy about this picture. The president was shot on national TV. His head flew back to the left, and now they're saying it was a guy who shot him from behind and above. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, then the academics, the loons, the shut-ins, all the people with a lot of free time, but good minds, get into the picture and they begin to look at it and they start taking it apart bit by bit and they say, well, actually, yeah, it doesn't make sense. And here's I'm a physics student, and here's the trajectory, and here's what would have to happen. And no, I'm doing an analysis in a home lab, and it doesn't make any sense. Okay, can we get this to a university? Well, no, the university won't have it. All right, we found a university that would do it, and we did the thing, and it didn't work. Well, as soon as you do that, the government comes out and sends 1,500 people to infiltrate universities, and maybe you don't even need 1,500. Maybe you just need 8. And they infiltrate the right university, and they sabotage something, and they screw something up, and they start messing around with the wrong people, and they create a scandal, and everybody's distracted. Oh, what happened? I don't know. So-and-so slept with the wrong person. Now we're upset. Oh, we can't look at those results. Those are skewed. Those results have been tampered with. We don't know if they're true. So we still believe the official story. Super propaganda. We still believe the official story because somebody screwed up the investigation. So now we can't believe that. Well, the investigation was flawed, you see, so the official story still has to be true. All right, that goes on for a while. And then people age out of it. They have to get jobs. They go on. They make, what's that called? They make loose change. They make loose change version 1, 2, 3, and 4. They get some actor to narrate one of them. They think that's going to be the trick. It's not the trick. And they get tired. They get beat up on Bill O'Reilly and other shows, and they just get exhausted. Somebody has a drug habit, somebody screws around with the wrong person, and their life becomes sort of a disaster, like most American lives, but it's put under a microscope and a telescope, so you can see it from far and wide, near and far, and they get tired, and they walk away. Then the next generation comes along, and they, hey, wasn't there that loose change thing? Wasn't there this problem with this thing? Oh, yeah. You know what? Maybe it was an energy beam. Yeah, what? Maybe it was an energy beam. You know, remember there's that guy in that iron suit and he could fly around and do all kinds of stuff? Well, maybe there was an energy beam. Now, you see what has happened is we've graduated from the realm of conspiracy realism to trying to come up with some conspiracy theories about how the conspiracies happened. We tried, and we got, people got tired. They got sleepy. They couldn't quite keep up. They had life happen. Life went on. Life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. They got exhausted and distracted, and they simply ran out of steam for doing the thing that they'd been doing for so long because nobody paid attention. They gave it their best. They were told that if they did their best, somebody would care, but nobody cared. Nobody ever came around and said, we care. And if they did, they infiltrated the thing, took it over, and sold it to Fox for to make fun of with some, fake documentary. 9/11 conspiracy theorists, psychotic murderers, you decide. That's exactly what they do. They put a 9/11 conspiracy theorist on that propaganda show, that NBC propaganda show, SVU, whatever, special vaccination unit, and they decided that a 9/11 conspiracy theorist was somebody who would kill his own psychiatrist. Of course, he needs a psychiatrist. So, you see, they get you. They get you, and then you get tired. And then the conspiracy mythologists, the conspiracy mythicists come around. And it's not enough to have a good idea and say, yeah, probably it was some sort of explosive, whether you want to call it nanothermite or bunker, small nukes, or whatever you want to call it. Somebody blew these buildings up so that there's a bigger political agenda. Let's not get lost in the nuts and bolts. We never will be able to figure out entirely, but we can make a pretty good educated guess based on all of the evidence that's there. Here's the educated guess. Certainly it's not going to be entirely perfect because we don't have the ability to be entirely perfect because we weren't there, we weren't allowed into the setup, and we're not being given the papers, but let's keep filing. We get some FOIA documents. Okay, it looks like... And you get a lot of information. And you compile that information, you go, damn, that's a lot of information against the official story, and the official story falls apart immediately when you poke it with a piece of straw. Okay, good. But those people get tired, and then people come along and they say, you know, maybe it was just an energy beam from Nebulon, from the planet of the Autobots, whatever that planet's called, Autobotron, and it was plugged into nowhere, and it used free Tesla energy. So free Tesla energy was used, you see, from an alien technology asteroid spaceship that you couldn't detect because it was shaped like an asteroid and it was flying in just the upper atmosphere, just in the boundary of space, and then it just fired a small rocket, and that blasted it out of the atmosphere, but yeah, it melted the World Trade Centers. And then Building 7 fell down with sympathy pains. It was having a sympathy cramp, so it fell down. And that's a fact, and if you don't believe it, you're a shill. You're a shill, and you're trying to disrupt us from finding the truth, man. Now the Earth is flat. You see, it's flat because no pictures that NASA makes can be trusted. It's not that NASA can't be trusted, but they do have telescopes that work, and they have launched rockets that work. No, they simply can't be trusted at all. All of their data is fake. Not some of their data is fake, but all of their data is fake. Not some, but all. You see, this is how it works. The conspiracy mythologists come along, and with very religious thinking, black and white thinking, without the ability to see the gray, the hues of color and the shades of gray, all 50, or 51 if you're into that sort of thing. Thank you. That was funny. Okay. You can't see all of it if you come from a religious or a myth-making mindset. The myth-making mindset requires that things be black and white. You believe in wizards, you believe in wizardry. So the conspiracy mythicist comes along and says, the world is flat because these people say it is, and they present 3 pieces of interesting evidence. Number 1, NASA fakes some of its photographs. Yes, they do. Number 2, NASA lies a lot of the time. They lie some of the time. Their biggest lie is that the Big Bang is a theory, that black holes exist, etc. The biggest lie has to do with the nature of the universe, because they're stuck in an 18th century, 17th century, 18th century Newtonian model. They're stuck in a gravity-only model. And I detail that in Chapter 9 of Official Stories, by the way. But they're stuck in a rather arbitrary model that comes from a different period that didn't understand electromagnetism and the electromagnetic force, the attractive force of electromagnetic attraction between subatomic particles and atomic particles. So they didn't understand that the electromagnetic force is 10 to the 39 times stronger than the gravitational force on this planet. In other words, a force that exists throughout the universe in the plasma is much stronger than gravity, so you don't need to worry about black holes and all this other stuff. Now, we've talked about this on the show, and you can go back into archives, you can read Chapter 9 of my book. The point is that little bit of information would save the NASA mythologist, the astronomy mythologist, from inventing black holes, spaghetti monsters, dark matter, white holes, whatever it is that they think they need to invent to make the universe work. Similarly, looking at photos from satellites would stop the conspiracy mythicists from imagining that the world is somehow flat and floating in space with oceans and a circumnavigable globe. They would stop. But now they're on to this. How exactly it got started has to do with maybe 1 or 2 people who were bored and had aged out of 9/11 thinking and had aged out of really deep thinking about the nature of life, and they were frustrated and they wanted to be famous. something in them wanted to make a splash. In order to make a splash in the mainstream, you have to be outrageous. You don't have to be honest, you just have to be outrageous. You have to be willing to be a fool, and you have to be outrageous, and you have to be willing to call people names. So immediately the flat earth people, if you don't agree with it, you call them shills. Shillville. You're a shill. You're a COINTELPRO. You're an operative. You're an insider. You're trying to disrupt our truth finding. Okay. You could pretty well demonstrate the roundness of this planet by the shadow it casts on the moon. You could send up an amateur rocket and take a picture of your area and see, again, the curvature of the planet, if you can get a strong enough model rocket to do so, and you can. You can look at all of the satellite photos that have ever been taken from commercial and non-commercial satellites. You can look at other objects in space that formed by similar processes to Earth, by the physical forces of space, which are electromagnetism and gravity. And you can see that a cooling object in a low gravity or non-gravity environment will form into a sphere. You can see that our shadow is a circle from whichever angle it's cast, and you could make a correct assumption that if you can cast a shadow from any angle and it's a circle, then the object is a sphere. You can do all of this kind of stuff, yet people will cling to a myth. And conspiracists will also cling to myths when their good thinking is ignored for long enough and they go crazy. The exact same thing happens to any people. The whole Christian religion is Hebrew myth fan fiction. The Hebrew tribes were people living in Palestine, which is right next to Egypt, on the Mediterranean, right next to it, for 1,000 years or so, 1,500-something years before they invented another myth. So they had this story that they had a variety of gods, and they had a war god in the south called Yahweh, and he had a girlfriend called Asherah. These people were constantly at war, so their war god was constantly being prayed to. Their war god was an asshole named Yahweh. As they increased their warfare and continued to lose, they mythologized their loss. They decided they were losing because they didn't worship Yahweh enough. So they decided to worship Yahweh more. But the more they worshipped Yahweh, the more they failed. So they wrote stories about how they weren't worshipping Yahweh well enough. Well, they all went to war with each other, all the Jewish tribes, until, they sort of resolved their differences through murder long enough to say, okay, we'll all worship one of them. It'll be Yahweh. And then they killed the female goddess. They killed the goddess, therefore killed the worship of the sacred feminine, or the feminine. They killed a model of the feminine in their media. Their media was the pantheon of gods. They killed the pantheon, and they killed the female host or co-host. So they didn't have anybody for the girls to feel inclined to worship, and they didn't have any females for the guys to sort of, lust after. So lust itself became something sinful to these people. They mythologized their loss. They continued to tighten their worldview around a particular male deity. They began to sort of demonize the female because they killed the goddess. They didn't kill the goddess because they demonized the female. They killed the goddess because they worshipped the war god too much to pay attention to other things, like a guy who's going and working at his job, or a woman who's going and working at her job too much and neglects her love life, or her hobbies or her interests. These people were constantly in bitter tribal warfare, and that's the god that they worshipped. They mythologized their failure, and they eventually said that they failed to worship Yahweh so much that Yahweh himself, a guy, turned his bitchy back on them, made himself into a human through a woman's ear, through the Holy Ghost or whatever, the holy semen in her ear, and was born as a person, or was, sanctified as a person through a Baptist, and then was killed. And that death was that of a Passover lamb. So the Jews lost their Passover, and anybody who believed that a human being became the lamb and then was reborn as a lamb sandwich, I guess, the next day. Jesus came back as a lamb sandwich. I don't know. Cold cut Jesus came back, and if you believe that story is literally true, then you're a Christian. And if you believe that you're a Christian, you believe that the Jews failed to honor Yahweh. You failed in your deal to honor Yahweh, and so you don't get to be one of the chosen people anymore. But everybody who believes in this story is now a chosen person. They mythologized their failure after the Romans destroyed them. In the Jesus story, the lamb cold cut story, the lamb sandwich, came to birth after the Jews were destroyed by the Romans, or as they were being destroyed, and then after it was really sanctified. So you can see that we mythologize our failures and our successes. When we succeed, we say, well, I prayed a lot, or, I ate really well, or, I prayed every night, and that was what did it. We mythologize everything. Or God wanted me to win, or God wanted me to lose. It doesn't really matter. We don't just win or lose because that's the way life is sometimes, or because maybe there are more forces at work than we want to. We combine all those forces into something and say God willed it. In a way it's true. In a way it doesn't mean anything. That's just life. So we win and we lose, and that's how the game is played, but we mythologize our victories and our losses. The conspiracy movement tends to lose all the time because they can't get a break in the university system and they can't get published in the mainstream journals. And no matter how reasonable a man like Richard Gage is, the media would rather make fun of us with somebody like Charlie Sheen, who was once very reasonable and then became unreasonable, or Judy Woods, who has never been reasonable, ever, on this issue. And that's how it works. We like mythology. Speaking of mythology, we're just going to jump topics in the last few minutes. I want to skim this article by Geoffrey St. Clair, or Jeffrey St. Clair, as he'd say in Wisconsin. Fukushima Mon Amour, The Hucksters of the Green Atom. I'm reading from Counterpunch, which I never would usually do, but this is a good article. Is the crisis in Fukushima over or just beginning? By the way, if you want more of that religious stuff, please make a donation to Liam Scheff. .com. There's a PayPal page. You can find it on my YouTube page, YouTube/Liam Scheff. Don't /Liam Scheff. Just go to YouTube/Liam Scheff, or Facebook. There's a PayPal account. Put in $5, $15, $20, whatever you can afford, 100. Or buy a collection of books and keep me in short pants and clean underwear. Speaking of clean underwear, is the crisis in Fukushima over or just beginning, writes Jeffrey St. Clair for Counterpunch. You might be forgiven for scratching your head at this one. Nearly 5 years after the nuclear meltdown triggered by the Tohoku earthquake and subsequent tsunami, one of the planet's worst radioactive catastrophes is almost completely faded from both media and public consciousness. Amid that information void, the lethal history of those events has been swamped under pernicious myths being spread by nuclear hucksters. In brief, the revised story of the Fukushima meltdown goes something like this. Now here you have, this is a commentary by me, myth-making by the nuclear religionists, by the people who believe the myth of safe nuclear power. Here it is, and it writes Jeffrey St. Clair. The Daiichi facility was struck by an unprecedented event, unlikely to be repeated. With the fail-safe systems worked, the meltdown was swiftly halted, the spread of radioactive contamination contained and remediated, no lives or illnesses resulted from the crisis. Full speed ahead. One of the first to squirm headlong down this rabbit hole of denial was Patty Reagan, a professor of nuclear physics, not the daughter of Ronald, nuclear physics at the University of Surrey. We had a doomsday earthquake in a country with 55 nuclear power plants, and they all shut down perfectly, although 3 have had problems since. This was a huge earthquake and a test of the resilience and robustness of nuclear power plants. It seems they have withstood the effects very well. All you have to do, this is me, Liam, commenting, is go look at reality. All you have to do is go look at the fact that you have 3 ongoing nuclear meltdowns with a complete die-off of life in the Pacific Ocean for this to be seen as crazy shit. Let's continue with the article. For Reagan and other atomic zealots, the Fukushima meltdown did not represent a cautionary tale, but served as a real-time exemplar of the safety, efficiency, and durability of nuclear power. Call it Fukushima Mon Amour, or how they stopped worrying and learned to love the atom. Such extreme revisionism is expected from the likes of Reagan and other hired guns for the big atom, especially at a moment of grave peril for their economic fortunes. More surreal is the killer compact between the nuclear industry and some high-profile environmentalists, which reached a fevered pitch at the Paris Climate Conference this fall. Speaking of conspiracy mythology, we've got climate science. It's a mess. Freelance nuclear shills such as the odious James Hansen and the clownish Georges Monbiot have left carbon footprints that would humble Godzilla by jetting across the world promoting nuclear energy as a kind of technological deus ex machina for the apocalyptic threat of climate change. Hansen has gone so far as to charge the opposition to nuclear power threatens the future of humanity. Shamefully, many Greens now promote nuclear power as a kind of ecological lesser evilism. Of course, there's nothing new about this kind of rationalization for the doomsday machines. The survival of nuclear power plants has always depended on the willing suspension of disbelief. In the terrifying post-Hiroshima age, most people intuitively detached the symbiotic linkage between nuclear weapons and nuclear power, and those fears had to be doused. As a consequence, the nuclear industrial complex concocted the fairy tale of the peaceful atom, zealously promoted by one of the most devious con men of our time, Edward H. Teller. So most people intuitively detected the linkage between nukes and nuclear power, but it was after ratting out Robert Oppenheimer as a peacenik and security risk, Edward Teller set up shop at the Lawrence Livermore Labs, now doing fake astronomy research, and rapidly began deigning uses for nuclear power as bombs, as industrial engines to propel the post-World War II economy. The article goes, Teller was the model for Terry Southern's Dr. Strangelove, by the way. The article by Jeffrey St. Clair at counterpunch.org is all there, and it talks about the intended use of the nuclear bomb to carve channels for water, to do oil and gas exploration, to make a port in, I don't think it's in this article, but to make a giant port in Alaska by using 20, 30, 50 nuclear explosions to carve out areas for human civilization to thrive. I wanted to get to that article quickly. We got just a minute left. Let's quickly look at the Porter Ranch idea, and I'm sorry I didn't get as much to it as I wanted to, but we've got Al Jazeera reporting that Porter Ranch gas leak begins to take a toll on small businesses. That's Al Jazeera loving to kick America when it's down, whatever. But, they're right, but that's their bailiwick. Aliso Canyon gas leak is there on the Wikipedia talking about how everything's fine. And then you've got Aaron Brockovich being quoted on ecowatch.com saying Porter Ranch gas leak is worst environmental disaster since BP oil spill. Well, she's right. She's the only one talking about benzene and radon leaking from the hellmouth, and she is correct. The rest of the media is deaf, dumb, and mute. There are conspiracy realities, and there are conspiracy theories, and then there's conspiracy mythology. You're going to have to learn to tell the difference between all of them. Myth is a story that's so emotionally compelling, maybe it's imaginatively compelling. Maybe it's more fun to think about Noah and the flood than it is about the Porter Ranch gas leak. But our job is to keep our feet on the ground and to keep asking questions of Liam Scheff and the Liam Scheff Show. Stay tuned to all the great programming. We'll be back in a minute with the end of the hour run-out group. Well, what did we learn on today's show? We learned that you can support independent journalism by buying my book or going to my PayPal account and putting in $5, $20, whatever you can afford, and that I will be very appreciative and thank you very, very, very much for caring. We learned that the Bible was a mythologization of the failure of the Hebrew tribes to win, that they blamed on their failure to worship their God enough. That Christianity is a continuation of that mythos. The Christian mythos is that because the Jews failed to worship their God enough, that God said, everybody else can worship me, all they have to do is believe that I came to earth as a person who was crucified and became a Passover lamb, and now you have to eat the blood and eat the flesh and drink the blood as wafers and cheap wine, and don't rat out the priests for being pedophiles. That's Christianity. That's Christianity. That's it. We learned that you can be as nice as you want, but I guarantee you'd be just as nice if you were a Hindu. We learned that Hillary Clinton might not be as much of a lesbian as I thought. We learned, if you read the Political Insider, you'll see claims that Bill Clinton's infertile and shoots blanks. Can't know that. We've learned that Chelsea may be the daughter of Hubble, not Edwin Hubble, but Webster Hubble. Yes, not the inventor of the dictionary, but Webster Hubble, former mayor of Little Rock, Arkansas. We learned that that's a bigger story than Fukushima destroying all life in the Pacific. If you go and look up what's happening in the Pacific, you'll realize that there's a giant die-off, a mass extinction happening on planet Earth. And it's not something that's just on television. It's not something that you can turn off. It's happening whether you want it to or not. It's happening in the Pacific, in and around Alaska, and points south, and may very well relate to a total decimation of, or eradication is a better word, of the food source in the biome of small creatures in the Pacific, working its way up to seals, birds, and who's next? And we've learned that official stories always exist to protect officials. That a myth is so emotionally, imaginatively